Welcome to Dear Fans. She was singing to save her sick son until Caitlin Clark heard the song. It was a chilly evening in New York City when Sarah Miller, a single mother in her mid-30s, found herself standing on a crowded subway platform, tears welling in her eyes. Her 8-year-old son Ethan was gravely ill, battling a rare condition that required a costly treatment she couldn't afford. With no other options left, Sarah made a bold, desperate choice that day, one that would change her life for forever. She started to sing. Her voice carried through the cold, echoing in the tunnels. It wasn't just any song, it was Hallelujah, sung with such raw emotion that strangers paused mid-stride. Captivated passengers dropped a few dollars into the guitar case at her feet. But Sarah wasn't looking for applause, she was looking for a miracle. She didn't notice the tall woman in a black coat and baseball cap standing at the edge of the crowd. Her face was partially hidden, but her expression was unmistakably moved. That woman was none other than Caitlin Clark, the basketball star. Had been on her way to visit an old friend in the city, but the haunting sound of Sarah's voice stopped her in her tracks. There was something in the pain and hope in her song that stirred memories of Caitlin's own struggles, the sacrifices her family had made, the moments of doubt, the unwavering love that had carried her forward. As Sarah finished the last note, her voice cracking with emotion, Caitlin stepped forward, pulling out her wallet. But instead of just dropping cash, she did something no one could have expected. She spoke softly, her voice barely audible over the subway noise. "You singing here? What's the story behind that voice?" Sarah hesitated, startled. She had no idea who Caitlin was, but something about her calm demeanor made her open up. "It's my son," she said, her voice trembling. "Ethan. Yes, I've tried everything, but I can't afford the treatment. I thought maybe if I sang someone would help." Caitlin's eyes softened, and she crouched down to Sarah's level, looking her straight in the eyes. "I know what it feels like to fight for something that feels impossible," she said gently. "Let's talk, tell me more." And so began an extraordinary conversation that would set Sarah and Ethan on a path neither of them could have imagined. Caitlin listened intently as Sarah poured out her story, how Ethan had been diagnosed with a rare genetic disorder, how she had sold everything she owned to keep up with a mountain of medical bills, and how she was now left with nothing but her voice and a mother's desperation. "I used to sing to him every night," Sarah said, her voice breaking as she wiped away tears. "When he was little, he believed my songs could make all the bad things go away, and now it's all I've left to offer him." Caitlin didn't say a word for a moment. She took a deep breath as if weighing something heavy in her heart. Then she looked at Sarah with quiet resolve. "I want to help," Caitlin said simply, her voice steady but filled with emotion. Sarah blinked in disbelief. "Help? Let's start with tonight," Caitlin said gently, picking up Sarah's guitar case. Sarah hesitated, unsure if she could trust the stranger, but something in Caitlin's voice, steady, calm, kind, compelled her to follow. They emerged from the subway into the glittering streets of Manhattan, the city alive with Christmas lights. Caitlin led her to a small cafe, its warm glow inviting. Inside, they sat in a quiet corner. "I want to hear more of your story," Caitlin said through your music. With trembling hands, Sarah strummed her guitar and sang a song she had written for Ethan. Her voice cracked with emotion as she sang about his bravery, her fear, and the unbreakable bond between a mother and her child. By the time she finished, tears were streaming down Caitlin's face. She reached across the table and held Sarah's hand. "Your voice, your love for Ethan, it's powerful," Caitlin whispered. "You've touched my heart tonight in a way I can't explain. I want to do more than just listen. I want to make sure Ethan gets the help he needs." Sarah's breath hitched. "What do you mean?" She leaned back, her expression serious. "I'll cover his treatment, every dollar. But it's not just about the money. I want to make sure you and Ethan are okay for the long term. You have a gift, Sarah. Let's use it to create something beautiful for both of you." Sarah stared at her, her mind reeling. Could this really be happening? Could a complete stranger, a woman she now realized was a world-famous athlete, truly be offering to save her son's life? Caitlin wasn't finished. "But I have one request," she said, a small smile playing on her lips. Sarah swallowed. "What is it?" "I want to meet Ethan. I want to hear a story from him. And maybe we can make a song together for him to hear when he's feeling scared." Tears spilled down Sarah's cheeks as she nodded, unable to speak. The next morning, Caitlin kept her promise. She arrived at the hospital where Ethan was being treated, carrying a basketball and a stuffed dog. When Ethan saw her, his eyes lit up with a joy Sarah hadn't seen in months. Caitlin knelt by his bedside, smiling warmly. "Hey, buddy, your mom tells me you're a fighter. I'm here to make sure you never fight alone." Ethan grinned, weakly clutching the stuffed dog. "Are you really?" Caitlin Clark. Caitlin chuckled, her eyes glistening. "I am, and I've got your back." just like I do on the court. As the day unfolded, Caitlin and Ethan bonded over superhero movies, video games, and a shared love of chocolate chip cookies. But it was when Caitlin brought out a guitar and asked Sarah to sing again that the room seemed to fill with something magical. Sarah sang softly, her voice trembling but steady. Caitlin joined in, harmonizing quietly, and for the first time in weeks, Ethan closed his eyes, smiling, as if the music itself was healing him. But this was just the beginning. Caitlin had already begun making calls to specialists around the country, determined to find the best care for Ethan. She even hinted at a project that would change Sarah's life, a charity concert featuring her voice to raise awareness and funds for families like hers. And as the sun set over the city that night, Sarah realized something. She wasn't just standing at the edge of hope anymore. She had stepped into a story of love, resilience, and the kind of kindness that could change everything. The weeks that followed felt like a dream, yet every morning Sarah still woke up with the same ache in her chest, the fear of losing Ethan. Though Caitlin had set the wheels in motion for Ethan to receive world-class treatment, his condition hadn't improved much yet, and time wasn't on their side. One crisp January evening, Sarah sat by Ethan's hot hospital bed, holding his frail hand in hers. He was asleep, his breathing shallow, the rhythmic beeping of monitors filling the room. Her guitar leaned against the wall, untouched. For days, the door creaked open. Caitlin stuck in, holding 2 steaming cups of coffee and a bag of pastries. She had been visiting nearly every day, bringing not only gifts but something more valuable. Hope you need to eat, Caitlin said softly, placing the bag on the bedside table. I can't, Sarah replied, her voice barely above a whisper. He's getting worse, Caitlin. What if it's too late? Caitlin sat down beside her, her expression pained but resolute. It's not too late, Sarah. We're going to fight together. You've done so much for him. Let me help carry the weight. Sarah looked at her, tears streaming down her face. Why are you doing this for us? You don't even know. Caitlin hesitated, her jaw tightening as she searched for the right words. Because I know what it's like to fight for something bigger than yourself, she admitted. I've lived with pressure, sacrifice, but nothing compared to what you're facing. And if I can help you avoid the pain of losing someone you love, if I can help Ethan, then it's worth everything. Her words hung in the air, heavy with meaning. For the first time, Sarah saw the depth of Caitlin's own struggles, the silent burdens she carried. She reached out, placing her hand over Caitlin's. Thank you, she whispered. That night, Caitlin made another phone call. This time it was to a renowned pediatric specialist in Boston. The doctor agreed to see Ethan immediately, but they needed to leave the next morning. Sarah packed up what little she had, clutching her guitar as if it were a lifeline. The private jet Caitlin had arranged felt surreal. Ethan, though weak, perked up when he saw the plush seats and sparkling lights inside the cabin. Mom, are we on a spaceship? He asked, his voice filled with wonder. Sarah laughed through her tears. Something like that, sweetheart. Caitlin sat beside Ethan, showing him how to adjust the seat and offering a small cup of hot chocolate. The boys' laughter echoed in the cabin, of sound that brought a lump to Sarah's throat. It was the first time in months she had seen him smile like that. When they arrived in Boston, the specialist wasted no time. Tests were run, new treatments were discussed, and for the first time Sarah felt a glimmer of real hope. But the journey wasn't easy. Ethan's body was fragile, and the treatments were grueling. One night, after Ethan had endured a particularly rough day, he clung to Sarah, tears streaming down his face. Mom, will I ever get better? He whispered. Sarah's heart shattered. She cradled him in her arms, singing softly, her voice shaking with emotion. Caitlin, standing quietly in the corner, watched with tears in her eyes. When Ethan finally drifted off to sleep, Caitlin approached Sarah, her voice low and steadier, stronger than anyone I've ever met. She murmured, Ethan is lucky to have you. Sarah looked up at her, her face str with tears. I'm not strong, Caitlin. I'm terrified every single day. Caitlin shook her head. That's what makes you strong. You keep going even when it feels impossible. Over the next few weeks, something remarkable happened. Ethan began responding to the treatments. The color returned to his cheeks. His laughter became more frequent. The hospital staff nicknamed him the Little Fighter, and Caitlin became a fixture in his life, visiting daily, bringing small gifts, a book, a toy, or just a simple smile. But it wasn't just Ethan who was healing. Slowly, Sarah found herself opening up to Caitlin in ways she never thought possible. They talked late into the night, about lost hope and the resilience of the human spirit. One evening, as they sat on a bench outside the hospital, Sarah turned to Caitlin, her voice barely above a whisper. "You've done so much for us. I don't know how I'll ever repay you." Caitlin shook her head. "You don't need to." Seeing Ethan smile again, "That's more than enough." Their eyes met for a moment. The world seemed to fade away. It wasn't just gratitude. Sarah felt it was something deeper, something she hadn't allowed herself to feel in years. Before she could speak, Ethan's laughter broke the silence, echoing through the night. Caitlin smiled, her gaze shifting toward the sound. "Hun's going to be okay," she said softly. Sarah nodded, her heart full of hope and something she dared to call love. But the story wasn't over. Life had a way of testing even the strongest bonds. And as Ethan's health improved, new challenges arose, questions about the future, about Sarah and Caitlin's growing connection, and about how to turn this extraordinary journey into something that could inspire the world. Months passed. The snow began to melt in Boston, giving way to the first hints of spring. Ethan's treatments were finally showing consistent progress. His laughter had become a daily melody in the hospital. Sarah couldn't believe how far they had come, from singing on a subway platform to sitting beside her son as he regained his strength. Yet with every glimmer of hope came a shadow of doubt. She couldn't shake the feeling that their miracle had an expert date. What if something went wrong? What if Ethan relapsed? And what about Caitlin? Would she disappear as suddenly as she had entered their lives? One night, Sarah found herself standing on the hospital rooftop, staring out at the city lights. She clutched her guitar, her fingers brushing the strings absent-mindedly. The cold wind bit her cheeks, but it couldn't cool the storm of emotions swirling inside her. "I thought I'd find you here." She turned to see Caitlin stepping out of the shadows, her hands in her pockets. She always seemed to know when Sarah needed someone. "Couldn't sleep?" Caitlin asked gently. Sarah shook her head. "It's like I'm afraid to close my eyes. What if I wake up and it's all gone?" "The hope, the progress." "You." Caitlin's face softened, and she stepped closer, leaning on the railing beside Sarah. "You're not going to lose me," she said firmly. "I'm here for you and for Ethan as long as you need me." Sarah looked at her, tears in her eyes. You could help anyone. Why did you choose me and my son?" Caitlin hesitated. "Because when I heard you sing that night, I saw myself in your fight. The way you were fighting for Ethan, it reminded me of the people I've loved and the people I've lost." Sarah reached out, touching Caitlin's hand. "You've been saving me and Ethan, but maybe it's time we save each other." Their eyes met, and in that moment words were unnecessary. The connection between them was undeniable, a bond forged through shared pain, through hope, and through the kind of love that doesn't need to be spoken to be felt. Just as the moment hung in perfect illness, Sarah's phone buzzed in her pocket. It was the hospital. Her heart clenched as she answered. "Sarah, you need to come down." The nurse's voice was urgent. "There's been a complication." Sarah froze, the blood draining from her face. No, he was fine. He was smiling." Before bed, Caitlin grabbed her hand, grounding her. "We'll go together." They ran down the halls, their footsteps echoing like thunder. When they burst into Ethan's room, the sight before them made Sarah's knees buckle. Ethan was pale, his small body trembling as nurses and Dr. S worked around. "And Mom," he whispered, his voice barely audible. Sarah rushed to his side, clutching his hand. "I'm here, baby, I'm here." Caitlin stood at the door, fists clenched, helpless. For the first time since this journey began, the doctor looked at Sarah, his expression grave. "His body is reacting poorly to the latest treatment. We need to stabilize him, but it's going to be a rough night." Sarah felt her world collapsing. She turned to Caitlin, her voice breaking. "What if this is it? What if I lose him?" Caitlin knelt beside her, her hands on Sarah's shoulders. "You won't," she said firmly. "He's a fighter as Sarah, just like his mom. You've both come too far to give up now." Ethan's weak voice interrupted them. "Mom, can you sing?" Her heart shattered, but she nodded, forcing herself to smile. "Of course, sweetheart." She picked up her guitar, her fingers trembling as she strummed the first chords. Her voice cracked with emotion as she sang Ethan's favorite lullaby, the same when she used to sing when he was a baby. Caitlin joined in, harmonizing softly. The rooms seemed to fill with warmth, the music wrapping around them like a protective shield. Ethan's eyes fluttered, closed, his breathing steady. The song carried him into a peaceful sleep, but Sarah couldn't stop the tears streaming down her face. She looked at Caitlin, her voice breaking. "What if this is the last time he hears me sing?" Caitlin pulled her into her arms, holding her tightly. "Then we'll make it count," she whispered. "But this isn't the end, Sarah. I promise you it's not the end." The long night stretched on. Sarah and Caitlin stayed by Ethan's side, their voices raw from singing, their hearts aching with a mixture of fear and hope. Sarah never let go of Ethan's hand, and Caitlin, though silent, never left her side. She was a pillar of strength in the Storm of Sarah's emotions, the hours crawled by, and just before dawn the lead doctor stepped into the room. His face was unreadable. Sarah held her breath. He approached her gently. "We managed to stabilize him," the doctor said. "It was close. But Ethan is a fighter. He'll need rest, and we'll have to adjust his treat plan. But he's going to make it." Sarah's breath caught in her throat for a moment. She couldn't process the words. Then the dam broke. Tears streamed down her face as she collapsed into Caitlin's arms, sobbing uncontrollably. "Thank you," she whispered over and over again. She wasn't sure she was talking to the doctor, to God, or to Caitlin, maybe all. 3 hours later, Ethan finally opened his eyes. Sarah was there, smiling through her exhaustion. "Hey, champ," she whispered, brushing a strand of hair from his forehead. Ethan's lips curved into a weak smile. "Mom, I heard you singing last night. It made me feel better." Sarah choked back a sob and kissed his forehead. "I'll sing for you forever, if it keeps you feeling better." Caitlin stepped forward, her voice warm and steady. "And I'll be right here to make sure your mom never has to sing alone again." In the weeks that followed, Ethan's recovery gained momentum. The new treatment plan worked wonders. Soon, he was out of the hospital, back to being the energetic, bright-eyed boy. Sarah remembered the bond between Sarah and Caitlin deepened, not just as friends, but as two people who had found light in each other's darkest moments. One evening, as they sat in Sarah's tiny apartment, Caitlin picked up her guitar and handed it to her. "I have an idea," she said, a glint of mischief in her eyes. Sarah raised an eyebrow. "What kind of idea?" "A charity concert," Caitlin said, her face lighting up. "Your voice has the power to move people. Let's use it to help other families like yours, families who needed miracle for their kids." Tears welled in Sarah's eyes. "I don't know if I can do that, Caitlin. I've only ever sung for Ethan." Caitlin smiled, gesturing toward Ethan, who was playing with his toys on the floor. "And look what that's done," she said softly. Her voice gave him hope. "Imagine what it could do for the world." The concert was planned for the following month in a beautiful theater in downtown Boston. Caitlin personally reached out to friends in the entertainment industry. Soon the event became a star-studded evening. Every ticket was sold out. When Sarah stepped onto the stage, her hands trembled. She looked out at the sea of faces. Caitlin was standing in the front row. Ethan was on her shoulders, cheering loudly. The sight gave Sarah the courage she needed. She sang with every ounce of love, pain, and hope she had ever felt. Her voice filled the room, moved the audience to tears. When the final note faded, the applause was deafening, but Sarah didn't look to the crowd. She looked at Ethan's face, lit up with pride, and at Caitlin, whose eyes shimmered with unshed tears. Later that night, backstage, Ethan fast asleep in Caitlin's lap, Sarah turned to her. "You saved us, Caitlin," she whispered. "Not just Ethan, but me too. I don't know if I'll ever be able to thank you enough." Caitlin smiled, her voice soft but firm. "You save yourself, Sarah. I was just lucky enough to witness it, and maybe," she added, squeezing Sarah's hand gently, "be a small part of it." Sarah leaned her head on Caitlin's shoulder, her heart full of gratitude, full of something more, a deep, abiding love that had grown quietly but unmistakably. She didn't know what the future held, but for the first time in years, she wasn't afraid of it. Ethan stirred in his sleep, murmuring something about superheroes. Both Sarah and Caitlin chuckled softly as the world outside buzzed with excitement over the success of the concert. Sarah realized something: her life had transformed in ways she never imagined. Ethan was healthy, her voice had found a purpose, and she had found a partner, woman who didn't just hear her song but became a part of it. And though their story was far from over, one thing was certain: it was a story of love, of resilience, and of the extraordinary power of human kindness. Like this video and subscribe this channel. Thank you.